Night at Fairmont Crest explodes when Madison slips and calls Ted dad, triggering a shock that leaves Chelsea frozen as an entire web of secrets begins to unravel. Who staged this moment? Is Madison a victim, a pawn, or the player making the biggest move? Will Bill and Keegan use this break to rip off Ted's mask and expose those murky sponsorships? And Leslie, Haley, Joey, Elon, Naomi, what knife is each hiding behind their back, and when will they strike? In today's video, we'll track wire transfers, old contracts, and covert alliances to see who's cornering whom and who will be the first to fall. If you love twists steeped in power and betrayal, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell because the next turn could set all of Fairmont Crest on fire. The moment Madison slipped and called Ted her father did not merely shatter the false wall of calm inside the luxurious Fairmont Crest home, it ripped open the cords that had always been fragile between people who thought themselves clever enough to hide everything. Chelsea stood as if the blood had been drained from her body, a tingling numbness spreading through her fingertips like someone had flipped every switch in her mind to off, and inside that silence came a series of jagged flashbacks, late dinners punctured by a third party's missed call that vanished from the screen, ambiguous envelopes of transfers on ledgers beside an ownerless education grant, meetings abruptly rescheduled for urgent clients that overlapped with Madison's appearances in the same districts. The entire string of pieces now queued up like chessmen nudged by an unseen hand to a single square, where she had to read the map of her own feelings and admit that every road led to one center of deception. The anger did not erupt at once. It seeped like poison, soaking into every unasked question, soaking into the way she looked at herself and wondered when she started compromising with the unacceptable just to keep believing a man could love her completely. Meanwhile, Ted experienced the opposite sensation, not fear of being exposed, but the cold bite of a failed plan, because the truth had surfaced at the wrong time, announced by the wrong person, and not according to the script he had prepared. He understood his standing with Chelsea had not simply collapsed, it had shifted into a defensive posture more dangerous still, where every decision might trigger a domino effect that touched property, reputation, and alliances he had built out of a blend of legal glitter and calculated shadow. Madison, in the second that froze the room, did not feel like a victor. The revelation of blood ties did not equal the gaining of a family, it only opened a door directly into a war zone where she had to decide whether she was a daughter, a piece, or a player, and each choice named a price no apology could repay. She looked at Chelsea through the thick glass of guilt and ambition, unsure whether she had just saved herself from exploitation or killed her best chance to be loved in the ordinary way she had always craved. Worse, that collision echoed like a siren to Joey and Elon, because the consolidation plan they had painstakingly embedded for so long relied on Ted being bound to discreet arrangements with a few blurred family knots, and now the rope had acquired a new volatile link named Madison. They did not fear the truth, they feared the truth told by someone who did not belong to them. Every number, every contract, every migrating share had required a silent actor behind the curtain, now the stage was flooded with feeling, the one risk factor no one can price. Joey began re-auditing the cross-payments and brand consulting fees that had flowed through shell firms, while Elon caught the scent of a legal minesweep if Keegan, the constant shadow to Bill, smelled opportunity. Bill, skeptical from the start, saw two layers of leverage in this break. First, the moral hypocrisy of Ted could become a hammer against allocation deals that had put Bill at a disadvantage. Second, a legal path to wrench off the masks of those who thought themselves invisible. He was not angry on Chelsea's behalf. He was angry at his own discipline for having swerved in a moment when he believed the other side would behave within the boundaries of civility. He contacted Keegan not to investigate further as a matter of professional routine, but to trigger a targeted hunt, excavate sponsorship paperwork, trace escrow accounts linked to Madison, and dig up any financial authorizations that could convert an emotional revelation into tight, admissible arguments. That methodical coolness evaporated his anger into clean fuel, and it was precisely this that unsettled people like Joey or Elon. Emotions are malleable clay, discipline is not. Across the board, Leslie smelled opportunity the way a perfumer knows exactly when to uncork a bottle. She approached Chelsea not with consolation but with a packaged sister alliance built from shared memory, similar wounds, and smiles soft enough to trick a victim's perimeter defenses. Leslie did not need Chelsea to like her, she only needed Chelsea to believe she was not alone. Because once a woman believes she has an ally, she shares data, and data was all Leslie wanted: calendars, files, habits, the empty blocks where Ted disappeared, the times the joint account was tapped for nameless expenses. Those crumbs were the hues for the total picture she intended to sell to the highest bidder in the inner power war of Fairmont Crest. Haley stood at another edge of the circle with an icy arithmetic. If family ranking changed, wills could change, trusts could unlock different doors, and marital bonds, already fragile, might receive a new lever. Haley cared little who hurt whom as long as the final map of interests did not place her in a blank zone. She reviewed a short list of asset attorneys, questioned out-of-wedlock child clauses in Ted's prior agreements, and quietly sampled the cocktail gossip market where the clink of glass often conveys more than a finance bulletin. Meanwhile, Naomi, the specialist in living at the storm's perimeter, quietly pinned old message fragments onto a new line. She did not want to stab, she wanted the knife, when it fell, to make everyone look in the same direction. Naomi knew secrecy is a kind of power, and dropping the secret at the right second is rarer power still. She weighed leaking a note of an appointment between Madison and a charity that had once received funds signed by Ted, not to accuse, but to seed suspicion. Was sponsorship the warmth of fatherhood or the price of silence to bury a momentous decision in the past? Jacob accidentally became keeper of a key when he found an old employment contract attaching Madison to an absurd salary for a vaporous project, bearing the initialed countersignature of legal, approved by Ted. Jacob did not want to be drawn in, but documents are objects that emit their own light. Once seen, you cannot pretend they do not exist. And Danny, with an unhealed wound from years of being abandoned by men who always cited some grand reason, saw a chance to reclaim the measure of justice she believed was hers. Danny did not think herself good, she thought herself the only one willing to walk straight into the center of fire if it meant forcing the man who pushed her life into a dark corner to stand under the harsh white of truth. Each person, propelled by a private anger and the shadow of old injuries, drove the story into a sequence of actions difficult to halt. Chelsea turned to self-forensics, opening folders, scanning emails, following the wire trails, only to realize she was turning into the controller she had never wanted to be. Rage led her down mirror-lined corridors where her reflection resembled the people she despised most, suspicious, cold, ready to weaponize information. She felt sick at Ted for hiding a child, but also sick at herself for suddenly feeling powerful and the right to judge. Perhaps the greatest pain is the discovery that we are capable of what we once cursed. Ted, instead of asking forgiveness, rebuilt the power structure around himself. He called accountants, called lawyers, locked secondary accounts, ordered leak sweeps. No one saw him panic, because panic is the province of the unseasoned. But that mechanical calm became fuel for those who hated him. They read not remorse but calculation, not a father seeking repair, but a crisis manager trying to protect assets and keep a name clean. Madison was crushed between two instincts: run to the man she called father to demand a lawful place, or step toward Chelsea, who might never forgive but was the only bridge to keep her from becoming a saboteur. Each path projected a ruin. If she claimed her father, she would be viewed as an accomplice to a seizure plot. If she sided with Chelsea, she would transform herself into living testimony against the only blood tie she had. In the noise, Joey and Elon convened a chain of strategy adjustments, which were in truth layered defenses: restructure project workstreams to cut traces to Ted, shift legal risk to satellite entities, and stand ready to toss anyone overboard if Keegan appeared on the horizon. They do not fear collision, they fear the right questions. And Keegan asks the right questions in a way that suffocates opponents within 10 minutes. He rebuilt the timeline, matched invoices, cross-checked data with geoimages, and drafted a relationship map where Madison's name connected to a web of monetary and legal nodes. The picture did not resolve to guilt, it resolved to choice, and it is choice that is expensive. On a rainy night, with porch lights playing on the water, Chelsea chewed through possibilities like biting glass. She could sue to assert her rights, but the nature of legal war is not to win, it is to prolong hurt until the other side stops breathing. She could forgive, but forgiveness does not restore trust dissolved at the molecular level. She could leave, but leaving would hand the ring to those praying she vanish from the board. She wrote 3 lists: what she knew, what she guessed, and what she did not want to know but had to ask. Each list ran on and on like an ugly seam on a couture dress. At the same time, Danny quietly collected crumbs about other sponsorships Ted had granted in the past, deciding not to wait before turning anger into motion. Danny knew there are only 2 endings: present the truth in orderly legal fashion, or throw it into the middle of a party with every principal present and force them to pick sides instantly. She chose the second, not because it is more effective, but because it punishes more. At a gathering meant to cool the air, Naomi accidentally dropped the charity appointment note. Jacob happened to set the old employment contract on the buffet while looking for files, Leslie dispersed into the corners whispering of a child without a name, and Keegan stood on the veranda, counting the steps to the center. The room turned into an unofficial courtroom where every stare was a juror and every phone snap a piece of evidence ready to explode online. Chelsea did not scream, yet she felt a silent blast spread from her ribcage to the walls. She looked at the people around her like exhibits in an overlit art museum, every edge so sharp it felt numb. She understood that from this second on any decision would turn her into someone the future her might not recognize. Would she forge anger into a sword to cut every tie, or into a shield for one last negotiation? Would Ted find the courage to break his own rules, step out of the strategist's armor, and do the gentlest and hardest thing: own the injury, repair what can be repaired, and accept the loss? Would Madison say no to both sides and choose a life with no privilege but the truth? And when Bill and Keegan closed their map, whose mask would they pull first? Ted's, the handlers behind him, or an entire mechanism that ran smoothly only because everyone pretended not to see? The answers did not arrive, but the aftershocks already did. A few minor shareholders withdrew from an infrastructure deal citing reputational risk. A charitable foundation abruptly requested an audit of funds received in the past 3 years, a staff accountant disappeared from town to care for an ill mother, and a nameless USB landed in Keegan's mailbox carrying a ledger of suspicious transfers. All streams converged on the moment Chelsea stared into her own eyes in the mirror and accepted a truth she had to pronounce. Her fury was not only for Ted, it was for a network of relations that had taught her to believe love could stand apart from calculation. As wind battered the curtains and the space returned to stillness, one last question hung like a curse from the ceiling. Who staged the instant Madison called Ted father? An accident of fate, a push from an invisible hand, or a long design to drive the entire clan to the brink where each must choose to save oneself or save another, but never both? As night closes over Fairmont Crest, that single word, Dad, still scrapes the glass like a scratch, reminding everyone that truth never arrives alone, it drags consequences behind it. Chelsea stands before the mirror, balanced on the edge between retaliation and self-preservation, while Ted locks down his auxiliary accounts as if he could bolt the past into a safe. Madison moves neither up the steps of power nor back to safety. She stands at the crossroads, where every choice is a named loss. On the perimeter, Bill and Keegan reorder the pieces: an ownerless USB, an absurd salary contract, a handful of consulting payments drifting through shell companies. Meanwhile, Leslie sprinkles the honey of alliances, Haley recalculates the will, and Joey with Elon raise new barricades for a storm they know is coming. Everything seems to hold its breath, waiting for a detonation signal. The problem is who will send that signal first. Will a donor's demand for an audit become the doorway to a hostile takeover suit? Will Naomi drop one last note that forces every eye back onto Ted, or suddenly swing the spotlight toward the architect of the entire stage? Will Chelsea forge her anger into a sword to sever every tie, or into a shield for one final bargain, trading for a version of the truth that won't be shredded in public? And among all the theories, perhaps the most frightening question is this: if none of this is an accident but the opening move of a long game, who is seated where they can see the whole board? We'll stop here exactly at the moment when the wire is pulled tautest. In the next video, we'll trace every breadcrumb on that USB, align the timing of those murky disbursements with each player's movements, and model who stands to gain most from a secret detonated right now. If there's a character you want us to dig into first, Chelsea weighing the unthinkable, Madison stranded in the gray, or the Bill-Keegan duo, drop it in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next flip, because one stray spark is all it takes for Fairmont Crest to ignite in ways no one sees coming.